I'm Joey.
I'm Jeremy.
And this is Dead South Paranormal. Well, we're up to episode 4.
Episode 4.
Episode 4, yeah. So tonight we are coming to you. We just are coming off of an investigation, but that information's not really ready yet. We are still in the process of working on all of that. So we decided to talk about some of our local, I'll say local, but some of our kind of ghost stories around here. One of the big ones growing up in this area for me was one called the Jacksonboro Light. And we'll talk about that. There's another one called the Land's End Light in Beaufort County, not too far away, several 30, 40 miles.
Yeah.
And some other stories around here. But before we do, go over to our social media and give us a like at Dead South Paranormal on Facebook and Instagram. YouTube is Dead South Paranormal SC. And then, of course, you can always email us at deadsouthpodcast@gmail.com. That's deadsouthpodcast@gmail.com. So, Jeremy, I know you grew up in the same area I did, and we all heard the stories about the Jacksonboro Light.
Yeah.
I have never been there.
What?
No.
Oh, man. First time I went was prom weekend.
Of course. It was
You could
prom
see
weekend.
the joy on Joey's face when
Yeah.
I said that, because that is a big thing to do around here. High school prom weekend, everybody likes to go to Edisto Beach, and which is not far from where the Jacksonboro Light, Land's End Light is all down that way. So, that was the first time I ever went to the Jacksonboro Light. Land's End Light, I've tried to go. I've been to the area. Some of the directions are kind of fuzzy. I know the road. I don't know exactly the whole process of where to go. I don't know, just from what I've read online, I don't know if some of the landmarks are still there. Over time things kind of digress, but
so there's a lot of lore about it, and we all heard the stories. Even back to, I remember my dad talking about it when he was in high school. And that was in the 60s,
right?
So it's something that's been around for a while. But one of the things that makes it really interesting is that it's kind of it's on a county road, it's actually in Charleston County, called Parker's Ferry Road.
That's correct.
And a lot of people, and especially the teens, it's the teens, would go, and it was something like you went down to the old church and you blinked your lights like 3 times or hit your brake lights 3 times or something. There was always a different kind of tale to it.
Yeah.
And then in time, you would see this orb of light floating towards you.
That is correct.
So I did a little research on it, and what we found out is that the kind of story behind it, what it was, because we've heard everything that swamp gas to skunk ape and everything else. But a long time ago, a daughter of a local preacher down there, now I can't say if it's the preacher for that church or not,
right,
but it was a preacher down there, went missing along Parker's Ferry Road. And when she did, of course, her father went out to search for her. And he used, back then, an old gas lantern. Or might have been even oil.
It could be an oil lamp.
Yeah, whale oil or something like that. And some people say he was struck and killed by a car. So it had to be, 20th century.
Yeah.
And then others say he was hit by the train.
The train, yeah.
And still to this day, people see this lamp, this light, wandering along this old country, kind of out of the way road.
Right.
And some people even actually say they see it like almost swinging.
That is correct.
And so they think it's the preacher looking for his daughter.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where that whole thing comes from. Now, we can think of a lot of, in that area, it's kind of weird. That area of the Lowcountry of South Carolina, that's what they call the Ace Basin.
That's correct.
Which the Ace stands for Ashepoo, Cumbie, and Eddystone Rivers.
That's right.
And a large wildlife management area, so a lot of land that is really not developed whatsoever. A lot of former plantation land down in that area.
Yeah, there's a lot of swamp in that area. There's a lot of marsh. There's a lot of trees, a whole bunch of different type of plethora of, rivers and stuff like that. So you got a lot of landscapes going on throughout that area. And one thing, and I don't know if we've ever discussed this, but I have actually seen the light.
You have?
I have seen the
Really?
light. Really?
That is crazy. Because, I can, like I said, I've never even went and looked for it. At the
Right.
time, I guess, you and I aren't that far age difference, but at the time when I would go down there for proms and stuff like that, or be down in that area, have a reason to be down there, the law enforcement in that area was really strict about trespassing and stuff like that. So we kind of steered away from it. And just as I got older, I guess I kind of just lost some interest in it and just never went there. But so you got to tell us about.
Yeah. So first of all, I've been on a handful of occasions, but since have you ever been down the road at all?
Yes.
Okay. So you know the layout of the road. But for those of you who are listening at home, when you get to this church, I would say 3-4 miles from the main highway is where this church lies. Well, this road there are some elevations in it, some hills and a little bit of dips in it as well. But the biggest thing is that when you reach the church, when you look back from the road you just traveled on, which is back toward Highway 17, you can actually see all the way, especially on a dark night and the train comes, you can actually see the train lights all the way back. That's a good little ways. You can actually see the railroad crossing signs when they light up. So the last time I went, which has been several years ago now, me and my wife, we went with a friend of ours, and we were there. The ladies were in the front seat. I was in the back. And of course, as per ritual, we pulled into the church parking lot. We turned around, kind of pulled off on the shoulder of the road. There's not much of a shoulder there. So you have to be careful. Dark night, honked the horn, flashed the lights, turned it off. We tried this a handful of times. And of course, every time it's very hard to decipher on what is coming at you. Is it the headlights of another car or is it the light? Now, the weird part about it is because it's such a straight road, it's kind of hard to tell what's coming at you. Well, the very last time we were there, we thought a car was heading our way. And so me being on the, erring on the side of caution, I said, you might want to cut your lights back on, start the car. So she did. And when she did, light was still there. So we immediately thought it was a car. She started to pull off. And as we did, this light zipped off from the road and into the woods. And I kid you, I was like, what? I was like, at that time, my mind was blown. I was like, are you kidding me? It was just the strangest thing because I kind of kept tabs on where, if it was a car, where this car would pull off.
Yeah.
Look down. There's no driveway. There's no house. There's no road or anything leaving the pavement of the highway into the woods. And so at that point, I'm like, well, it must have been the light. And it's odd that you did mention the swaying of the lantern as if someone is swaying walking with a lantern. That's exactly what it looked like. If you watch it close enough, even though you see the small light in the middle of pitch blackness, that's what it looks like. It looks like it's swaying back and forth. So that was the one and only time I've seen the light. And like you mentioned about law enforcement, I heard they have been prevalent over the years, and I have had no reason to go back.
Yeah, they got pretty stiff with it down there for a while. So
Yeah.
that story kind of lines up with this story that I was able to pull up as well. And it's a little small, so you have to excuse me. I'm going to have to really focus. Excuse me. Talks about this brother and sister that came on a trip basically to document this ghost light, basically. And they got there right at dark and set up to get ready for it. Her brother had moved to Colleton County and decided to take them along. They have seen this light before. The brother has. But they had seen this light before, and they knew that there was a good chance of it. So they went down, they did the ritual. The almost exact same thing happened. They saw this light. Wasn't very bright. They actually describe it as almost being a yellowish tint hue.
Yeah, I would think it would, immediately in my head, for whatever reason, I think it would be blue for whatever reason, but it's not. And like you said, it's not very bright light. So.
Yeah. And they obviously, they saw the swinging motion of it as well. And there are hundreds and hundreds of reports of this light. Now, it's interesting that a lot of people have actually investigated it, from what I understand, and they cannot, with 100% certainty, rule in or out any ecological or scientific reason for it. Now, going back to that area, that's a really, again, strange area. So much so, did you know that there was actually a titanium mine in Ravenel right down the road?
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So we call it the reservoir. We do dive training there because the water is, during the summertime, the water can be near crystal clear, at least 25, 30 foot visibility.
Oh, wow.
In the Lowcountry of South Carolina, which is unheard of.
Exactly.
And it smells like metallic-y. Like it's got this metallic sensation to it or smell to it, kind of. So it's this really like odd area. You have these weird things like that in the area. And I don't know, the train, of course, that is a dual track, both passenger and commercial trains travel that train track all times of the day and night. And it's hard for me to kind of wrap my head around it still, that we have some type of light anomaly. Some people have attributed it to the phenomenon of ball lightning.
Hinky punk, ignitus fat, what is it called? Ignatius fatus. It's like hinky punk, also known, will o' the wisp. Is what it's kind of like. Of course I'm talking gibberish to most of you, but it's basically like it's what our ancestors would have called these phenomenon. It's like swamp gas, ball lightning, these things that they didn't have explanation for.
Yeah.
And
it's one of those things, it's swamp gas and methane and hydrogen sulfide and all that stuff. We don't have a lot of methane deposits.
But how much methane and swamp gas do you know that can be called upon by,
moved? almost moved. It really, if you look at it closely, I think it's more of a, it fits all the descriptions of a residual haunting. Repetitiously.
Right.
It is triggered to occur.
I agree.
And so it meets some of those definitions. And it's interesting enough, not far down the road from there, in an area in Beaufort County called Land's End, is a very, very similar, it's almost the exact same occurrence.
Yes.
Occurs. And of course, Beaufort, we've talked about Beaufort before being kind of the outside of Charleston in its historic nature of hauntings. Beaufort is a really spooky place, man.
It is.
And the Land's End Light is described as, and this is the Land's End area of Beaufort, so everything's kind of a boat landing in Beaufort. It's a water town. A yellowish orb that appears on about a 3-mile stretch of Land's End Road.
See, that's what I was going to next. And once I got to thinking about it in my head, it's another stretch of highway, kind of like the Parker's Ferry.
Yep. On St. Helena Island, which is, interestingly enough, if you do the trajectories or lay a line from St. Helena Island to Jacksonboro, as the crow flies, it is not ridiculously far.
No. Yeah, if you had a boat and more water, it'd be a lot quicker trip.
Yeah, 100%. So it's interesting that it occurs in that area. Some people out of Beaufort County, and if you talk to any of the folks down there, say that particular stretch of road on Land's End is actually one of the most haunted roads in South Carolina.
That's interesting.
It has the nickname of South Carolina's Sleepy Hollow.
Really?
Yeah.
I never knew that.
I know, that's crazy. And
there's a lot of history there.
Yeah.
Because you're right, like literally not even a mile away, you have the Penn Center where Dr. Martin Luther King actually studied. Then you have the Chapel of Ease, which is right there as well, it has its own stories. So, I mean, that's pretty interesting. And, it kind of goes back to what you were saying a moment ago about that area. Like it's like something down around Highway 17.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people feel this way in other parts of the country, but there is like what's the word? It's like an atmosphere it's palpable, that almost like when you leave here and the further you get into the Lowcountry, it's like something that you can pick up and it's on the air. It's crazy. It's like a change in the wind. It's like a something about the environment changes. And I don't know if you felt it, but I know I feel it, and I feel it every time.
It's funny you say that. There's a road in Beaufort County that I almost hardly ever go down.
Any particular reason?
It's the feeling it gives me. I have not seen anything.
It's a bad feeling.
Yeah, I get a very ominous feeling, and that's Old Shell and Church Road.
Really?
Yeah.
I travel it all the time.
Yeah, and I've been down it a million times, but I get very uncomfortable down that road. Very, very uncomfortable. And we'll talk about Old Shell and Church probably another time, but there's a lot in that area. And the fact is I think some of it has to do, at least for me, is the unknown of that area. There's so much that went on in that US 17 corridor from Charleston County to Beaufort County that is not it's not documented.
It's not talked about.
Yeah, no, exactly. Not even, there's no oral traditions or anything about it. It is mainly a lot of it because, I guess, embarrassment of some of the stuff that was done. Not so good stuff. Also, there is the air, of the voodoo religions and Santeria and all from West African slaves and things like that. And some of that was brought over, obviously. And that mixed with Christianity created almost like some quasi-religious beliefs and things like that. And, you know, that is the area from which we get the word haint.
Correct.
You can go down to the town, anywhere around what we call Yamasee. So Yamasee is a town, and it is also an area.
Yes.
So the town of Yamasee, the incorporated town of Yamasee, is very small, but the area that we call Yamasee is pretty large. And it extends into Beaufort, Hampton, and Colleton County, of that area of that community.
Right.
And it is not uncommon for houses to have the haint blue paint on the floors and the ceilings, or even be painted completely blue, have the certain color lights on their front porch.
I know, I'm not sure if a lot of people, the bottle trees,
Yes.
bottle trees are part of that as well.
Correct.
So if you ever riding through South Carolina or any southeastern coastal town, and you see these bottles, they're usually green. Some of them can be clear, green, blue in color. They have a bunch of different tints to them. There's no label on them or anything. People wash them out real good, and then they take them and they kind of make a little tree out of them, and you'll see them out in their front yards. And they're, of course, they put the little branches, you know, slide the bottle down over the branches and stuff. And so you'll see them a lot around here, and that's supposed to be able to ward off spirits as well. But oddly enough, I've, you know, I don't have a bottle tree. I'm sure my wife wants one, but
I mean, it's kind of one of those, you know, it's to me, the bottle tree represents a culture. It is interesting enough that going to Eddystone Beach itself, there's a bottle tree.
Yes.
On the right. There's also the bra tree on the left.
Yes, there is.
But you see those things, you see certain indicators of parts of belief systems still today.
Yeah.
And when we talk about places like Beaufort, interestingly enough, this light, going back to that, it kind of does the same thing as the Jacksonboro Light. It almost looks like a single beam automobile headlight. But as it gets closer, it gets bigger but dimmer than a headlight. That same color. Almost an oval, rounded shape.
Right.
And then this yellow to almost pale orange color. It's actually so popular down there that several years, about 30 years ago, I shouldn't say several now, about 30 years ago, it would be nothing for a sheriff's deputy to go down there and see up to 100 cars parked along that road.
I didn't realize how popular it was like that. Yeah. That's crazy.
And I think that's kind of, you know, when we say, well, 30 years ago now puts me at the end of high school. I'm just saying, I saw something on TikTok last night that Black Hole Sun from Soundgarden is turning 30.
Shut your mouth.
Yes. So that's kind of the way it is.
It's funny how our minds work.
Yeah. So nobody really knows what it is, but the story behind this one is that during the Civil War, there was a battle down there. Obviously, there were battles everywhere in the Lowcountry during the Civil War. Confederate soldiers were stationed in that area due to the location's strategic position, the Beaufort River. And in 1861, soldiers got into a fight with some of the island residents, and one of the soldiers, Frank Quigley, they actually got a name, was decapitated in the fight. And the legend says he now wanders Land's End Road with an old iron lantern in his hand looking for his missing head, and the lantern is the orb.
Now, see, I've actually heard of a headless soldier down on this road as well, but the story's a little bit different, but practically the same. It's just that a soldier was on guard. They left him alone, and then he was ambushed from the back and sliced his head off. So,
Wow. Also, there's a couple legends around this, and some people actually say the light is the light of a ghost of a slave.
I've heard that as well.
Who was hanged on the island, or it could have been the ghost of a heartbroken man who was sold away from his wife,
Yep.
and he's just endlessly searching for his family. Other people say it's from runaway slaves of the time. So, and they were caught up and hung on that road.
Yeah, because if you look up the directions for this place, they actually say that there's a giant oak down there that kind of stretches out over the road. There's several oaks down that kind of stretch out over the road, which is why I said it's kind of hard to pinpoint this exactly. But in the directions, that tree was known as the hanging tree. Also, too, I have heard that, I want to say it was back in the 60s, 70s, there was a school bus of children that had gotten into a terrible wreck, terrible accident, and a lot of them had passed during that time. So just an extra little story to throw in there of what this possibility could be, but you never know. Like I said, I've been there several times, but I've tried to look for it, but it's kind of hard to pinpoint because, once again, there's no sign up there saying sit here for, Land's End Light.
And thank goodness, obviously, that it would be pretty popular today, too, I would imagine. But, those are some of the local legends that are here, and they're enduring. We think 30, when I read 30 years ago, I was like, my dad was in high school. And I was like, no, I was in high school.
Yep.
But all of these things are enduring legends, almost over a century old.
Yeah.
And there are things that people who are not necessarily into paranormal things can go out and experience.
I agree.
And, obviously these types of things, and being a paranormal podcast, we have to always assume that these could possibly be paranormal.
I agree.
These are, and if they are residual hauntings, which also have very little risk to the person of something attaching to them and things like that. So,
I feel a field trip coming on.
oh, yeah. This might just be one of them things where you just get in a truck and ride one night.
Yeah. Some of the best things happen on a whim.
I know, right? But there are other stories out there. There's paupers' graves all over the Lowcountry.
Oh, yeah.
And what paupers' graves were, so they put two groups of people in paupers' graves. Number one, they put the poor. Number two, they often put slaves.
This was the same thing that would be considered like a potter's field.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. And so only thing these things were places that were donated land that they would put or intern bodies there.
That's right.
And it could be, anybody could be there, but they were usually the poor, destitute folks. And there are so many of those things around that the documentation for it is very, very limited. I've got a friend who actually has all of the known cemetery plots in Colleton County on a map.
Really?
Yeah. And some of those cemetery plots are not there now. He's been around. He actually created a map book of Colleton County for emergency services, and he's ridden every road and
wow.
And all of that. And he's a big history buff. And so there's those weird things like that out there. And there's hundreds of those places that are buried, people are buried.
Yeah.
And all of those things are potential for paranormal activity. And I think it's interesting to note that there's places now that people build on. You put build, you erect a business there, you erect a house there, you might not know if you haven't done your research deep enough or further enough back what's there.
This is true.
And but one of the things that we also, so it's interesting. So we talked about US 17 through Beaufort County. And we talked about, the funny thing is that almost all of the things that paranormal wise have something to do with that road or its byproduct road. There's a US 17 alternative as well.
Yeah.
That is a little more northern, that runs through that area. But almost everything paranormal, when we talk about the Legree hauntings, when we talk about the lights, when we talk about different places such as the super haunted cemeteries, all are along that corridor, that Ace Basin.
Yeah.
We've talked about before, and I'm actually working on it, getting permission to go to the Presbyterian Church on Edisto Island.
That would be awesome. And for you, that's for Julia Legree, the tomb of Julia Legree, and that would be great.
So, number one, that is, if not one of the oldest Presbyterian churches in the country.
That's a great looking church.
I know. I've been in it one time.
Never been in it, but I have been past it several times, and it is a beautiful church.
It is. I can't explain what order of magnitude gorgeous it is on the inside.
It's pretty immaculate.
And it is a beautiful place, beautiful grounds.
Yeah.
And Highway 174 runs right through the middle of all of its grounds, right? Because the part of it is on the other side of the road there as well.
Right.
And it has a bunch of historic graves. The church was built in 1685.
Oh, wow.
And the original church in 1685 pretty much has stayed the same. There have been some changes in 1831.
Mm-hmm.
They had to rebuild it, and the current church is that church. So the original church was 1685. The current church is 1831. And there are historic graves back there all the way back to 1787. So very historic area. Union troops actually occupied it during the Civil War.
Wow.
So, and then it remained all through Reconstruction and all of that. So one of the big draws, and this is one of the, I would call it quintessential ghost stories of the Lowcountry, is the story of Julia.
Oh, yeah.
So the church graveyard contains the Legree mausoleum, and it's Legare.
That's
Legree.
Yeah, I was saying it wrong for years.
Yeah, it's not Legare. It's Legree.
It looks exactly like Legree until I was like, no, it's Legree. I was like, oh, okay, my bad.
Julia died in 1852, and she was 23 years old.
I was about to say she was very young.
Very young. And their story kind of goes, without too much pomp and circumstance in it, is that she went visiting and she came down ill. Now, we have to think about that time period. It could have been yellow fever, malaria, something common. It could have been a common disease that we don't see today.
That's correct.
And, well, she malingered for several days and ended up passing away, so they assume. So they interned her body in the Legree mausoleum.
Same day.
Same day. And
this was back before the embalming process.
Yeah. And to understand the same day thing, it is, there's not cold weather in the Lowcountry of South Carolina.
No.
We're having our winter right now, and it's 50 degrees outside. And So most of the time, and even down on the coast during the majority of the year, with the exception of maybe 1 month, the temperature is in the high 70s usually.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times. So there was no embalming, there was no body preservation, so they interned these people rather quickly because of the obvious decomposition that could occur, as well as you have to think about some of the superstitions around bodies and things like that. These people were dying of diseases that they didn't quite understand. We didn't understand them yet.
That's right.
So you had to think about that. And so they didn't know whether it was the plague as far as they were concerned or whatever. So they wanted to kind of put the body away. Well, later, one of the uncles died, I believe it was.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure who died, but another Legree family member passed.
So they sealed it with used to be a marble door.
Correct.
A marble door. Now this is a pretty big mausoleum. I'd say it's 10 by 10, if not.
It's fairly big. I'll be honest with you. Once you see it, it's not as deep as what I thought it would be. But I mean, for the width and the size of it, I mean, I guess for its time, I'm sure it was huge.
Yeah, and expensive.
Oh, absolutely.
But it had a giant marble door. And nobody's gonna pick that up by themselves. She had a 6-year-old son, so I just looked it up. She had a 6-year-old son that died a couple years later.
I did not know that. Or maybe I did and I tucked it away. I don't know.
So her son's name was Hugh.
Okay.
And he died in 1854. So, and probably of feverish diphtheria as well. And when they opened the door, Julia's body was found by the mausoleum door. She had woken up from a coma. It was discovered that she died a second time trying to scratch her way out. And after they made that discovery, the family members reburied her and once again sealed the door shut. And the next morning, the door was found open again.
Yeah, this is where the eerie part comes in. If that wasn't eerie enough, I believe they even said they found claw marks on the inside of the door where she was trying to get herself out.
Correct, yes. And it says, you can see where she was trying to scratch her way out.
If that is not horrifying enough in itself, I mean, to wake up and you're in the family tomb. And like you said, I mean, it goes back to, the times that this all occurred. With the tools and instruments and utensils that they had at the time, the doctors determined that she had, in fact, passed.
Yeah. So they tried to seal that. The thing is, though, they tried to seal that door several more times, and every time they'd seal it, they found it open. So they eventually just left it open.
Yeah.
And until this day, you can go by there now and you can look in that too.
Yes, it is wide open at this point. I do believe, like, toward the end of that whole story, like, they thought maybe the original door that was used to seal the tomb was maybe something faulty with it. Mm-hmm. And so they removed it and they bought a whole brand new door. It was, to the tune of that, it had to be brought in with heavy equipment, heavy machinery. They brought it in, they put it in, they sealed it, and then the next day they would come back and it was like shattered on the ground.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's spooky stuff there. I mean, to the point where you could tell that Miss Legree does not like the door there.
She was not a fan.
She was not happy.
So, and you can actually, if you look at pictures online, you can actually see the different tomb or headstones inside the mausoleum there. And it's actually, when you look at it online, it looks big, but again, it's a mausoleum. And I know I've seen mausoleums other places. And, and they're, it's large. It's a large family mausoleum.
It is.
But they serve a purpose, and that is what they are. They to protect the outside from what's inside as decomposition occurs. That is probably one of the, like I said, I call it the quintessential ghost story of Edisto Island.
I 100% agree.
because of the tragedy that occurred, in that she didn't die a second time. She really she only died once.
Yeah.
But she died in a really tragic way, and nobody knew any different.
Yeah.
And so,
because I think it was it 6 months? I get this confused, but at first I want to say it was like 6 months before they found her. I think is what it was, or I don't think it was 6 years, but I think it was like six to 8 months, I guess, till the next family member passed, and that's when they opened the door and they found her body there. And I was like, oh, that's just horrible, and that would be horrible for the family as well, of course. To open that up and realize the mistake that they had made.
Oh, absolutely.
So.
And again, at the time, medicine was not what it is today.
Correct.
So don't, this isn't throwing shade at anybody.
No.
This was during a time where you stubbed your toe, they amputated your leg. So you had those things, and diphtheria and all of those really bad diseases, malaria, yellow fever, were rampant throughout the area. We have mosquitoes the size of Volkswagens down here that carry all kinds of stuff that we still deal with today. So, but again, it's not far off of Ace Basin, 20-minute ride off of Ace Basin to there, or to US 17. As well as 17 goes right through the middle as you go north through the Holy City.
That's correct.
Right in the center of Charleston.
Mm-hmm.
And Charleston, with its, I would like to call it illustrious history.
Yeah. For those of you who have never been to Charleston, and even, I would say this goes for Charleston's past as well, but Charleston is a bit of a melting pot, which is part of the reason why it's called the Holy City, because you had all these different religions that were making its way to the south. And so, it was a place where, after slavery had ended, that people were coming, and it was a bit of a booming Mecca for people almost.
Yeah.
To the point where, and that's because there were so many different religions back then. That's why it became the Holy City. That's how it got its name. But not to mention, I actually took a ghost tour in Charleston years ago.
Wow.
Many, many years ago.
Many.
Yeah, it's been a moon. But long story short, I was told that the weird thing about Charleston is that, Charleston has a lot of older cobblestone streets and such. And this particular street we were on, I do not recall the name of it, but where we were at, as many churches and steeples that are in Charleston, and the tour guide told us that if you could not see the steeple of a church, then you were believed to be out of the sight of God.
Wow.
And if that was the case, then guess what? That street, that's where all the debauchery and all the bad happenings occurred late at night. And, so it was just one of those things. And I said, it was an interesting fact. So.
Yeah, it's weird down there too. You can get a really strange vibe down in Charleston, man. I've been down there a lot.
Yeah. And
I find it to be, I'm trying something here. I'm trying to do a couple different things at once. And I don't know whether it worked. Anyway, so as you travel downtown Charleston, and a lot of people feel Charleston sometimes can't be the safest personal safety.
Agree.
But there have been places down there that we have walked and stuff, especially later in the evenings, mm-hmm. that almost has that feeling.
Yeah.
And if you've ever walked into a place and you get in there and you feel like almost your nerves are tingling, and you get this almost like back and forth dizzy feeling.
Yeah. Unbalanced.
Yeah. That's electromagnetic forces probably. And a lot of it has been a lot of people used to be affected by really poor wiring in buildings. To be
Yeah.
honest. Charleston has that kind of air about it. It also has that certain, Jeremy, I know what I'm talking about, and it's not the paper mill smell.
It does have a smell now that you mention it.
And it's not the paper mill of the horse carriages. It's, I liken it to Spanish moss, like that. Yeah, see?
It could be. I'm also thinking of the water.
Yeah.
It could be the water as well. But yeah, I know where you're going with that.
So, yeah, it's definitely a unique place. And again, Charleston is considered one of our most haunted cities, and it has arguably one of the most haunted buildings in South Carolina, the jail.
Oh yeah, the old Charleston City Jail there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Charleston has a notorious past. Of course, it was the port of which everything for the Southeast came through.
Yeah,
for the
came
most
and
part.
went.
And so it had everything from slave trading to piracy to you name it, it was there. And a lot of people were hanged. A lot of people had different illicit means of employment, I guess was the best way to put it. But Charleston is one of those, it's a beautiful city.
It is.
And it's so unique in that aspect. And then as you travel on up, Mount Pleasant, Georgetown, there's all kinds of stuff if you talk about Georgetown. McClellanville, all of those places.
Oh yeah.
But we're moving out of the Lowcountry at that point. Now going back, I think one of the keys, or one of my favorite things about living down here is you just never know. It was kind of like when we did our first investigation, Jeremy. We had zero expectations and got our minds blown.
Yeah.
And it goes back to what we said last week, was that this is just some building in a random town, and there are hundreds of towns and thousands of buildings. And how many of these have stories like this? So I actually did a little more follow-up on our first investigation of the school. There are 2 schools in Earhart. Yep.
Where's the second?
So most of y'all won't know where this is, but just to explain to Jeremy, the road we came into the back of the school.
Right.
Okay. If you follow that road all the way down past a 90-degree curve, there is the actual original Lewis Butler building with the name still on the front of it.
So the one we were in was not the original building.
No. I had to come on here and make that correction.
Oh, well, it looks like we'll be going back.
Yeah. I remember like picking up my cousins from the original school. And at some point, I think when I was very young, it was kind of like a middle school at that point. But the original Lewis Butler school, the one that Mr. Lewis Butler had built,
Right.
is literally 2 blocks back and 3 blocks over from where we were.
Yeah, so it was not the one we were in.
Not the exact one we were in. Now, he was over that one as
Correct.
well. That was still,
Yeah.
because we found the stuff in there from Lewis Butler.
Oh,
school.
yeah, definitely.
But there is another building.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So you have this mix of just all kinds of stories, and there's no history. I can't find anything on it. Nobody has anything.
Nuts.
I'm having to go to people that sometimes that remember it and try to dig information out about that. And that's the thing about investigating, is that a lot of times you don't know how deep you're going to end up going.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think on some of our future investigations, as we put those together and present them to you, you're going to see just how deep some things can get.
Yeah.
So,
it's funny you brought that up, because it lets you know that we're only seeing, this is just the tip of the paranormal iceberg.
yes.
I mean, we when you think about it and you look at the way South Carolina is broken down, you've got the coast, the low country, you've got the Midlands, and then you've got, upstate. And so that's a lot of area to cover.
That, and there's so many from your hometown, Springfield.
Oh, yeah, definitely. There's a lot going on there, too.
It's a lot happening up there, and there's a lot we need to explore with that because there's some good stories coming up from over there.
Definitely. So yeah, I mean, y'all stick around. We got a lot planned. We're trying to do our best to open new doors for ourselves. And if anybody out there has got any great leads or any great stories you'd like to share with us, please shoot us a message on social media or send us an email, and we'll respond to it here on the show, possibly read your letter or whatever you have that you would like to send us. And give us some topics you'd like to hear us talk about, or maybe even some places you'd like us to investigate, because we'd be more than happy to accommodate.
Yeah, 100%. And we're not above coming out and, interviewing anybody that wants to have their story told, who wants to tell their story. We're definitely, we have the ability to get out there and do that. So thank y'all for listening to us today, and we hope to see y'all very soon.
Yep.
Don't forget, I'm going to put it up here for the third time. Like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Dead South Paranormal, at YouTube at Dead South Paranormal SC, or email us those stories or questions to deadsouthpodcast@gmail.com. Jeremy, I think we got it.
I think that one's in the bag.
I think so, man. So thank y'all for joining us. We appreciate it. Y'all have a good night.
Y'all take care.